Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The customary address by the President of India to a joint session of Parliament at the beginning of the session in a new year has always held its own importance. It is in this address that the President puts forth the views of the government, which normally tries to list out its achievements in the previous year and also what it intends to do in the coming year. President Pranab Mukherjee, in his nearly hour-long address today, touched upon a variety of issues which the government has been tackling and wanting to tackle. Interestingly, President Mukherjee also called upon the Parliament to debate and discuss and not disrupt and obstruct. Obviously, going by the previous experience, when the sessions have proved to be heavily disrupted, President has hoped that this session will turn out to be smoother and constructive. Today, we will look at some of the issues which has been raised in the address and also the challenges faced by the government in this budget session. To discuss this, I have with me Pushpesh Pant, political analyst and a former professor at JNU, Professor Arun Kumar, Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the JNU, Madhav Nalapat, political analyst and a senior journalist, and Smita Gupta, political editor of The Hindu. Welcome to all of you. Professor Pant, you know, when President has today's, if you look at President's address today, he has listed out a whole lot of things which is customary, of course. But what is it that you think that the government is wanting to pinpoint in a few issues, if you think?
I think the crux of it is that the government wants the Parliament not to be disrupted.
Yes.
And if it can
and that sentence of Pranab Mukherjee reflects the government's...
And I think that is of crucial importance,
yes.
that any other priority cannot even be put on the table if the debate is not there in the Parliament at all. And I think the government may list a lot of its priorities, but it's almost like the Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat. A lot of people have been complaining that the Man Ki Baat doesn't touch on the issues which concerns them and which are blaring on the newspaper headlines. So I think the same applies to the President's address to the Parliament. It's customary. It is written by the government. He has no option but to read it. And the long list is, to my mind, a bit distractive. If there is a shorter, crisper address, then you focus on what the nation is worried about. It's not a fireside chat. So I think an hour-long address in itself dilutes the impact of the address a little.
But this is something which has happened. It has been so customary that nobody seems to have, Mr. Nalapat, nobody wants to disrupt that custom which has been going on. But do you think that, what Professor Pant was saying about the government's anxiety to see that this House is conducted in a smooth manner this time, you think that is possible?
You know, Girish, the way I read that speech, it's almost as if the government knows that nothing much is going to happen in Parliament, because most of the measures discussed in the speech are measures outside Parliament and the law. They are mostly administrative measures. We are talking of technology, we are talking of roads, we are talking of certain innovative ways of reaching into people. These are all administrative methods, and they don't really depend on laws. The only point made by laws was a large number of laws that are superfluous are being removed. Well, we have been hearing that for quite some time. They have not been removed. And my fear is that a lot of the laws that have been removed are laws that nobody even looks at. And the really important laws that need to be removed are still in the books.
And which needs to be legislated are still not in
But the second point which I noted was this juxtaposition of Deen Dayal Upadhyay and Subhash Chandra Bose. So in that sense, what you're saying is, if you're a national hero, you're beyond a political party. You know, Deen Dayal Upadhyay is supposed to be of one political persuasion, Subhash Chandra Bose is supposed to be of another political persuasion. But by bringing them together, you're giving a message that, look, don't claim a political ownership to any national hero.
Okay. Professor Arun Kumar, this address, there's a lot of economics in it, a lot of intentions and also things which have been done to a certain extent. Like, they've spoken about Jan Dhan Yojana, Employment Initiative, Make in India, and a whole lot of things. Yes. You think that these are all intentions, or have they been able to, in this last 1 year, been able to move ahead?
Okay, one thing that's clear is that this budget looks at what happened politically last year. The loss in Delhi, the loss in Delhi, the Bihar loss. They realize that they have to address the poor. They have to do inclusive growth, inclusive politics.
He starts off with this Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
Right. So, whereas the rhetoric last year and the year before was pro-business, now that is being toned down. I think that's a political lesson that has been learned by this government. and that's why it's putting that forward. Now, therefore, I think this pro-business thing that has been there, in the Make in India and other things has gone down a bit, and the other things like inclusive growth, etc., has been brought up. And your question that, what has happened on these schemes, for instance, Jan Dhan Yojana, now the figures that have come out is that the numbers have increased to 19 crores, the amount of deposit has gone up to 27,000 crores. But if you really look at it, will the poor really be able to save to put money into it? Who are the people who are putting the money into it? That needs to be analyzed. Similarly, take the gold scheme, which is a good scheme. You want to monetize gold. You want to get the savings activated. But, that scheme has not done very well. The government has pointed out that FDI is coming in more, okay? But that could be because other emerging countries are doing poorly, and therefore money is coming into India, but not necessarily because Indian growth story is really robust. And that's what you see.
There is a mention here also of GDP and how...
Yes, I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
So there's an instability in the economy because of which the investment climate is not very robust. The private sector is not investing more. The rate of investment has gone down from about 38% in 2007-8 to roughly about 28% now. Now, unless that goes up, the rate of growth of the economy will not go up. Now, what are the steps that are being taken? The government has announced many things, but the roadmap is not very clear about how those investments will come. Whether, given the instability that is there in the country all around, whether the Jat movement, whether the Kapu movement in Hyderabad and Andhra Pradesh and the Patidar movement in Gujarat, etc., would that lead to a conducive investment climate? How do you deal with those politically and socially? I think those issues also need to be addressed. And while what the government has said is all good, that we have done this, etc., but the future roadmap of how to deal with the uncertainty in the economic and political and social terms, that also needed to be highlighted.
That doesn't seem to be present in the...
Should have been there.
That is what is lacking in the address. Smita, how do you say, do you agree with Professor Arun Kumar? He made a very interesting point that there seems to be a shift in the way the government is trying to project itself from a pro-capitalist, business kind of government towards poor. Do you think that it's a very well thought out decision? That's what you see in this address also?
Yeah, I think it's a very calculated and deliberate move to project this government as pro-poor. They talk about Narega, expansion of Narega and improvement of Narega. They talk about food security. They talk about the Gramin Sadak Yojana. So there is a huge emphasis on looking pro-poor again. Then all the schemes for the farming sector to address the agrarian crisis, talking about crop insurance, irrigation schemes and so on. But I also think, in addition to what the speakers before me have said, that what is also interesting is that they haven't really posed the most serious challenges. If they have, they've done it in a very oblique way. For instance, the unrest on the campuses, JNU, Hyderabad.
That has not been addressed at all.
It's only in an oblique way. You have a reference to Subhash Chandra Bose in the last paragraph and what he said about nationalism. Or Rohit Vemula, there's a quotation from Ambedkar, and how much emphasis this government is giving to the 125th anniversary, talking about social justice. So it's a very kind of oblique way, but not really addressing that, nor have they referred to the crisis in Jammu and Kashmir, which has been without a government. So I think basically this government still remains in election mode. It knows after its defeat in Bihar, as Professor Arun Kumar pointed out, that unless it starts winning elections again, there's going to be a problem. And therefore, I think the huge emphasis on looking pro-poor, pro-farmer, and in a sense, much of that part of the speech could have been, under a Congress dispensation, but for the fact the choice of icons
including mention of minorities and what is
there is a whole paragraph on minorities also.
Okay, Professor Pant, what Smita was talking about, do you think that what is missing is also very important?
I think the elephant in the room is missing. The problem is, I entirely agree with her. I think we are making this textual analysis of the presidential statement to the speech to the parliament. But what about the context? I mean, is anybody going to consider this newsworthy, headline-worthy tomorrow morning? Our minds and thoughts are still with the students agitating in campus being charged with sedition. We are worried about the real people who should be charged with sedition, who have gone scot-free, those who have uprooted the railway tracks, those who have burnt in public property. Nobody is talking about the Jat agitation as a challenge to the state. Now, the problem is that people are dying and we are paying our tributes and saluting the martyrs in Jammu and Kashmir. And we are not talking of, when the budget comes, after all this session is named after the budget. So budget comes and there will be an allocation on defense forces, allocation on social sector. And that's what I think Smita made very emphatically. I don't need the presidential speech to the parliament to convince me that the government has changed. It is a cosmetic image manipulation. I would go by what I'm encountering and experiencing in my everyday life. If I have to worry about my safety or my vehicle safety traveling from Gurgaon to Delhi because of the Jat agitation, if I have to go without water 2 days in Delhi or in Gurgaon because of this, I mean, if my life and limb are threatened because I raised a few slogans in university, I mean, I'm afraid. So much is happening around us and the context is missing in the text.
That's a very important, Mr. Nalapat, you agree with that? The context, you think that the president could have addressed the context, the government could have, made him address these contexts and at least put forward how it intends to tackle these issues?
Well, here it's basically a broad kind of almost a vision of governance, in which you've got technology, you've got the underprivileged, all the right slogans are being expressed. But yes, now for example, you had the Gujarat agitation, you got the Jat agitation. The root of that is joblessness.
Right.
We have had nearly 12 years of jobless growth in the country. And that is a very serious problem because you've got young people who are feeling a bit lost and they were completely losing hope that they're ever going to get a job. So from that point of view, what is the practical economic policy? My view, quite frankly...
There is a mention about employment initiative and, kind of how many jobs they want to create. Those things are
Girish,
there.
all this is there, but the fact is now the budget, for example. Now we've had two budgets that are very conservative and very routine. You've got a very routine monetary policy. You've got a very routine fiscal policy. There's been no naya soch in either of this. If we got a third budget in a row, which is also very routine, which keeps high taxes and which really talks only in terms of feeding the bureaucracy rather than promoting growth, then you're going to have a great deal of disillusionment with the government. So I would say the budget is going to be much more important than the president's address.
Absolutely.
In terms of winning over or losing people.
Absolutely. Professor Arun Kumar, apart from we'll come to the budget aspect of it in this whole session, what is it that we can expect and things like that. But what is missing in this budget? What is missing in this speech? Is that a cause for concern?
What is missing actually, because given that India is a large country, global situation is changing, so lots of things are missing.
The context what Professor Pant
but I would say some critical things are missing. Okay, for instance, as Nalapat has already said, the budget which is coming, which in fact looks at the past policies and says what's going to happen in the future. The past has been very uncertain. The future is also very uncertain because the world economy is very uncertain. Indian economy is very uncertain. So how do you deal with it? At least we should have had a hint of how we are going to deal with uncertainty and how would the budget which would be presented would deal at least with part of that. Secondly, environment and climate change are very major issues that have come up in the recent past. WTO is another very major issue because that's going to affect trade, etc. Some hints should have been there with regard to that. Unemployment, and as you know, in UP when 328 jobs are advertised, 23 lakh applications came, 380 PhDs, 2 lakh MTech, BTech, etc. So that shows that the frustration in the youth is very high. That's what you see in the Jat agitation, etc. That needs to be addressed. So some of these critical things should have been there as at least a pointer to where the government will go, because this is supposed to be a pointer to what the government will do on the basis of what's happened. So in that sense, this inclusive image, etc., leaving aside some of the important things, but they'll be very crucial for these pro-poor programs, because if these are not addressed, unemployment, etc., then the pro-poor programs will not work. So there had to be a complete package on that.
Yes, would you like to react?
No, ultimately the question is, who's going to pay for these programs? And it's going to only be paid by a growing economy. So you can have the pro-poor program did not help the UPA to come back to power. The UPA was certain to come back to power on the basis of all the schemes. It lost miserably. The reality situation is we need double-digit growth. And till now, frankly, we are not seeing policies that enthuse people sufficiently to give a promise of double-digit growth.
Okay, Smita. Smita, what is it that the government is expecting in this session? Does it have some minimum? Do they have a minimum thing that in this session at least we need to do so much in terms of legislation? Do they have a minimum benchmark?
Well, in the first half of the session, there are 16 sittings, of which much of it will be occupied by the, debate on the president's address, the main union budget, the railway budget, and the government has two priority legislations. One, they want to replace an ordinance on the Enemy Property Act, and one law they need to pass for delimitation in West Bengal for the, those constituencies where there were exchange of territories. That actually leaves less than 3 days. In this, and the private members bill also there are 3 Fridays. So that will effectively leave 3 days for the opposition to initiate debates. Now, what the government has done very cleverly is that its own MPs have already given notice for a debate on the JNU crisis. So it's possible that it might even be taken up tomorrow. And they feel that through this debate, they will be able to set the tone for this session, by bringing up this whole issue of nationalism and patriotism to the fore to take on the opposition. So instead of letting the opposition take that initiative, because as we have seen in the last so many days through their own programs and marches, what they are trying to do is they moved away from Hindutva. If Hindutva was talking about the majority community being under siege, what they want to project is a whole country under siege, and they will try and project everybody else as anti-national. Now we have to see whether the opposition is smart enough to counter these arguments, because these are difficult. This is a difficult argument to counter because the arguments against are much more sophisticated. They're not in black and white. So I think in that sense, they've come up with this strategy. We have to see during the session how it works out.
That's an interesting strategy, Professor Pant. That you were speaking about all these issues which were there. It's the ruling party itself will bring forth all these issues. Then they hope that in the next couple of days they'll finish the discussion on this, and then the entire session is clear for them to do their business. Because what Smita, obviously they are not interested in bringing the GST bill in the first half of this session.
It's not.
So
it's not
even listed in the first half of the session. So is this a smart strategy?
I don't think so. It's a very smart strategy because I think, unfortunately, I would go back to the events of the recent past. What is happening is that the credibility of the government, forget about the ruling party, is seriously dented by its overzealous supporters. Now, you see, the problem is that the hope with Mr. Modi was that he put development in a priority and Hindutva and the rest of the political agenda on the margins. What has been happening lately is showing that you are playing a good cop, bad cop routine. Yours is the voice of sanity, yours is the voice of balanced statesmanship. But when it comes to the everyday reality, the quote-unquote, the goons who support you go back to patriotism, go back to nationalism and hit you hard. So economics takes the back seat and we are back again to let's decide it because I am patriotic, I can't suffer an insult to my motherland, everything else comes later. So I mean, I'm afraid that's going to be somewhere at the back of the mind of people who are watching the debates. And I don't think it's very easy to have a clean closers like this, that you have 2 days of clean debate about JNU or Rahul Vemula on Hyderabad or,
and then it's over.
Or a kid being slapped in the BHU and get away with it and say all is fine. It is not.
Mr. Nalapat?
I quite agree with what he's...
No, is that the strategy? That, Hindutva is not working, nationalism is now the new, launching pad or whatever you want to call it. And so let us try that. And this strategy of your own MPs bringing these issues onto the fore.
You see, Girish, the question is how do you define Hinduness and Hindutva? Now, if you define it almost in Saudi Arabian terms, that is, you must have a clear dress. There's a dress code, there's a diet code, there's a behavior code, there are all kinds of codes. then a lot of people are going to say this is nothing to do with Hinduism or Hindutva. So when you have a very restrictive version of Hindutva, which puts in a lot of very harsh and restrictive codes of conduct, and then you say anybody who doesn't conform to those codes of conduct is being unethical, immoral or anti-national, you are turning away a lot of people.
But Hindutva is not an issue now. It's nationalism is the issue.
No, I want to say very
The
clearly.
mask is nationalism.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to say again, stress, is the problem with the BJP is, I think this big victory has somehow gone to the head of the party. Now you see the ABVP. In so many campuses now, the Vice Chancellor seems to be almost, a flunky of the ABVP, doing what the ABVP wants. Now this is very damaging to the university and even to the ABVP. So what is happening now is this feeling that it's, that they have been given a huge victory, so the thing should go their way. The GST, for example. I for a long time have been saying there's nothing wrong in accepting those 3 Congress conditions and getting GST passed. If it were passed 3 months ago, that would have been the headline. The entire optimism on India would have been much brighter. But then you say, no, it must be GST the way we want it and nothing else. Now that kind of, if I may say so, that glow of the 26th of May or 16th of May 2014 is still there. And the reality is, the glow of a victory lasts a very short time in politics.
Professor Arun Kumar?
I would have expected that
this strategy to put away
Yes.
the GST bill, which till last session was the most important thing, which was being discussed. And now it doesn't matter, he will put it away to the second half of the session. How smart a strategy is that?
GST is not that critical as far as I can see, because after all, without GST also we had 8-9% rate of growth between 2005 and 2009. So it's not as if that's the most crucial thing as far as the economy
that is what you think, but that's not what the government
True,
thought.
but what I'm saying is that this to me is a missed opportunity, because here was an opportunity because your economy is in a bit of a crisis, your exports have been down, industrial rate of growth is very low, agriculture has been down because of the continuous drought, etc. A services sector is not looking up all that much. So your rate of growth is low, you are uncertain, there's a lot of economic fluctuation that's taking place, stock markets are fluctuating, other markets are fluctuating, commodity prices are down. That signals that the world demand is down, and therefore your exports are not going to go. So even though that may benefit because we import a lot of oil and other commodities, but on the whole it means aggregate demand in the world economy will be down, and therefore your stock markets will continue to go down, your financial markets will have problems. So we needed a clear sight on that. Now, this is also a budget session, so we need a clear sight on that, but hopefully in the economic survey,
we'll get
more
some
of it. But the point is, this is a missed opportunity, because here is something that you could have given pointers to the country, that these are the way in which the government will proceed in the 1 year coming ahead, politically, socially and economically.
So you don't think that putting off the GST is anything
not that crucial as far as I can see.
You don't think it's crucial?
No, it's not that crucial, because suddenly, in fact, if I argue, as I've done in my EPW article in July, actually small-scale sector will suffer as a result of the GST benefiting the large-scale sector, and therefore the rate of growth can actually go down, unlike what some people are suggesting. So we have to be very careful and tread very carefully about the GST bill.
Okay, yes, Mr.
No, I simply want to say that, you must now take, for example, services. It is expanding very nicely. And then what happened, you have steep rise in taxation of services. And the service sector now is no longer performing as well. So the entire emphasis is on raising revenue to feed the bureaucracy, is not on promoting growth. All over the world, you've got lower interest rates. In India, the Reserve Bank has kept on raising interest rates. You've got an absurdly high level of interest rates in India today. And you've got high taxation, and now you're going to get higher service taxation. Now, all this is creating an impact on the middle class. It's creating an impact on the business community. These were two groups that strongly supported Mr. Narendra Modi. And today I can tell you there's an increasing amount of doubt in both these communities about that kind of support. So my own view is this kind of a very conservative economic policy is what is doing more damage to this government than the so-called Hindutva hardlining.
Smita, what Mr. Nalapat is saying is, to a great extent, we keep hearing about it, that this shift after the Bihar elections especially towards looking, wanting to look pro-poor, is it also hurting the other section which were, which, as Mr. Nalapat points out, had backed this government in a huge way?
Yeah,
and isn't the government aware of it? How are they going to tackle that?
Yes, I do agree with Professor Nalapat, but I want to go back to something that Professor Arun Kumar mentioned about the GST bill and the medium and small scale sector. Now, there has been a view among a lot of political parties, let us say, who are equidistant to BJP and the Congress party. There's a strong sense that since the BJP has for long depended on, the backbone of that party has been these small traders, that they don't really want to hurt them. And there is a strong pressure from them. And there is actually within the, BJP itself some doubts about whether the GST bill should go through. Because otherwise it's inexplicable, as I think all the speakers before me have pointed out, of being able to push the GST bill through.
No,
though I don't know that much about...
Sorry to intervene, Smita. Are you really trying to say that there is a rethinking within the government about as far as the GST bill is concerned?
I don't know about government, but certainly the decision-making sections of the government. I mean, this is something that some very responsible, senior political leaders, MPs, who deal with all, and as I said, I specifically said equidistant from BJP and Congress have said. Because surely if this government had wanted to pass the GST bill, they could have done it. And I don't know about the long-term impact, but certainly it would have at least been a kind of, it would have sent a signal out that this government was interested in the reform process going forward, and signaling to those sectors that that Professor Nalapat just said are getting alienated, those people who had voted.
One more thing, Smita, before I come to the others. Do you think that this strategy of getting to discuss about whether it is JNU or Hyderabad University or generally the campus scene at the beginning of the session and being done with it will work for this government, will ensure that this session is going to be a smooth session?
See, I don't know whether it will work, but I can certainly say that this government's focus is no longer on development, growth, or all those things that they promise. It is about winning elections, about energizing its own cadres. It will certainly energize the ABVP, because one thing that one noticed, for instance, during the during the Bihar elections, was how dispirited the BJP's own cadres were. In Assam also, the stand that the government took rightly on the Indo-Bangladesh
conclave,
border
enclave
thing annoyed a lot of BJP workers. So now I think the whole focus is on keeping the cadres happy, keeping its core voters happy, and the focus is on winning elections.
Okay.
It's an election mode.
Okay. Professor Pant, very quickly. So, this session, because we were told that as Mr. Professor Arun Kumar pointed out right at the beginning, and Mr. Nalapat pointed out, 2 years gone, 2 budgets have gone. This is the most crucial budget, that's what people say. Do you think that they'll be able to pull it off?
No, I think to respond to that, however, briefly, I'm struck by what Smita said. I seem to think that the BJP seems to be suffering from a multiple personality disorder at the moment. The question is whether they want to retain what is supposed to be their core constituency, the small traders, the hardcore Hindutwalas, or they want to excel in a core competence of delivering on the development front. Now, there was a great opportunity, as both of them gentlemen agreed, when Modi won, that he could have spread the bottom of the pyramid for support. And if you want to retain the core constituency and try to address marginally other constituencies, you are not going to please anyone in the end.
Okay, very quickly, the last words to both of you. You agree with him? Is that where the session is going to end up, as government trying to play for another election? Or because we have elections coming in three, 4 states.
Let me tell you that you can never please a core constituency. But except that you can keep them reasonably, avoid them from being displeased by growth. Now, the reason why GST is important is because the Prime Minister's strategy depends a lot on a heavy dose of external investment. He's looking at India looking like a bright spot in the global economy, and the world investing in India, make in India, etc. For that, you must show that the government can legislate, the government can perform. And for that, passing GST was important.
Okay, very quickly, one sentence.
One small thing, what Smita said about energizing the cadres, I think the cadres of the BJP need tranquilizing at the moment.
Okay, I think on that note, we need to end. Sorry, I don't have much time, sir. But, it's going to be a very interesting session. all my panelists feel that there are various issues. How the government will handle all these issues, what it is going to focus on, will be very interesting to watch. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue of the big picture same time tomorrow.